while vertical stripes add an impression of height, as demonstrated by the Helmholtz square illusion. Stripes never lost their pejorative connotation and allusion to deception. Throughout history, they have been associated with prostitutes and other social outcasts, even appearing on prison uniforms because the stripes made it easier to spot escapees in a crowd. The site plan of the Yugoslav Pavilion shows a distinct, sharp-edged, star-shaped design, coupled with a tall, thin architectural protrusion. Research does suggest that this form emulated the shape of a ship's bow. The pavilion had a striking facade, entirely covered in black and white horizontal stripes, spaced about 30 centimetres apart. But there is no documentation to show how the patterns on the adjacent surfaces met. The model of the pavilion reconstructed the missing facade information by applying dazzle camouflage technique to its exterior. Dazzle camouflage, or razzle-dazzle, was a type of ship camouflage used during World War I and credited to the artist Norman Wilkinson. Dazzle consisted of complex patterns of geometric shapes in contrasting colours, interrupting each other at different geometric edges. This made it difficult to estimate the ship's direction, size and speed. A game of optics, a tactical trick to control appearances. Wilkinson's designs have been compared to the revolutionary modern art movement called Cubism. Although an overlap exists in the appearance of dazzle and Cubist art, Wilkinson himself was anything but a modernist. In fact, he was a celebrated marine painter, commissioned to create paintings for the elegant smoking rooms on board the Titanic and the Olympic. A metonym for architecture as a whole, the facade is an element most invested with political and cultural meaning. The contemporary spectator is trained to focus on the facade to the detriment of other elements. Compared to the floor, the walls, the roof, the door or the window, it is a remarkably young architectural concept. Once established, it embodies the composition, profile, signification and monumentality of a building. Its codes of representation embed themselves in our neurological wiring, triggering Pavlovian reactions to certain types of architecture. Functioning as the envelope of a building, the purpose of the facade is to represent and entice the viewer. An example of such seduction is the design for the National Pavilion of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, built at the Barcelona World Exposition in 1929 by the Serbian architect Dragiša Brašovan. Brašovan achieved great international acclaim at the exposition and won the Grand Prix, the highest award at the event. But due to the political intrigues of other nation-states, Brašovan went on to lose first place to the German pavilion and its world-renowned architect, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. According to Brašovan's memoirs, van der Rohe spoke to the jury members and convinced them to overturn their decision and award the first prize to him. Known today simply as the Barcelona Pavilion, this emblematic work of the modern movement has greatly influenced the aesthetics of architecture since. After the exposition, the Yugoslav Pavilion was disassembled, like all other temporary structures built for the occasion. But mysteriously, unlike the others, the Yugoslav one left behind only a few traces of its existence. There are some photographs of its exterior. One photograph depicting the side elevations, an aerial image of its wider architectural context, and a photograph of the Spanish king's visit. There is also a site plan of the grounds where it was placed. Based on these, a 1:7 scale model of the original pavilion was made. This scale replicates the ratio of a standard Lego brick compared to a standard house brick. With only partial information about the building, the model uses other appropriate historical designs to recreate its most likely form and ornamentation. The pavilion had a striking facade, entirely covered in black and white horizontal stripes, spaced about 30 centimetres apart. An uncannily similar example of this decoration was found in a well-documented but unrealised project by the eminent architect Adolf Loos, designed a year prior to Brashovan's Yugoslav Pavilion. Adolf Loos' plans were for the Parisian residence of Josephine Baker, the American-born dancer, singer and black civil rights activist, also known as Black Pearl. Loos had an opulent space in mind for the Baker House interior. He planned for an indoor pool where its resident could swim whilst being observed by spectators drinking coffee in the overlooking garden. It had the makings of a peep show, housing desire for the spectators' pleasure. The interior of the Yugoslav Pavilion also performed as an exhibition space. It was designed to present the latest industrial achievements of the nation to the Expo's international audience. But how this actually looked remains unclear. One photograph of the original interior does exist, but it was impossible to reference it when the model was being constructed, as the document's owner was on a research trip to Paris. So, the interior of the Baker House was transplanted into the model of the Yugoslav Pavilion, a logical solution to the missing information, given the noteworthy similarities between the design of the two buildings. As often suggested, stripes exaggerate the dimensions of a surface or figure. Horizontal stripes emphasize width, while vertical stripes add an impression of height, as demonstrated by the Helmholtz square illusion. Stripes never lost their pejorative connotation and allusion to deception. Throughout history, they have been associated with prostitutes and other social outcasts, even appearing on prison uniforms, because the stripes made it easier to spot escapees in a crowd. The site plan of the Yugoslav Pavilion shows a distinct, sharp-edged, star-shaped design, coupled with a tall, thin architectural protrusion. Research does suggest that this form emulated the shape of a ship's bow,